Our next talk is from Greetings to Corruption, Politicians, Political Parties, and Tweeting in India. And the speaker is Lia Bozarth from University of Michigan School of Information. Lia.
Can I start?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lia. So today I'll be presenting the talk on From Greetings to Corruption, Politicians, Political Parties, and Tweeting in India. This is joint work with Anmol, Panda, Budak, and Joyojeet. So to start with a simple observation, we see that existing research on politicians' use of social media has been largely centered on Western society. In recent years, there have been more work that focus on political leaders in India and the Global South and their use of social media platforms such as Twitter to address their constituents. But the large-scale quantitative analysis are comparatively fewer compared to Western societies. Now, India is really unique to the West in several contexts. First, it is the largest democracy and is really diverse in terms of its party structure. Indian political parties are not aligned neatly in political ideologies. It has a lot of different languages and have complex history in religion. Secondly, candidate selection is actually done by the party itself, and rather than individuals volunteer to run for offices. Additionally, candidates' social media identities are typically managed by parties and party leaders. And finally, unlike the West, which focuses on freedom of the press, First Amendment, like the United States, news media in India still treats public officials with a level of deference. And we see that national level Indian papers heavily criticize any individual political leader. So given this unique context, it's really important to examine a scale of what Indian politicians use Twitter for. So we have three research questions for our paper. First, what is the overall presence of Indian politicians? Which party has the most presence and are most active? Additionally, who holds the most influential accounts? Next, focusing on the content of the actual tweets, do we see politicians are more focused on casual conversations, building personal relationships, or are they focused on policy relevant subjects like information, technology and development? And the next, are there party-based difference in communication strategies such as hashtag usages? And finally, focusing on the key leaders, Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi, do we see visible distinctions in the way they communicate on Twitter? So to answer these research questions, we first have to identify a list of Indian politicians. We actually started with a manual approach. We collect the names of the known Indian politicians, and then we manually went through and searched every single one of them on Twitter and find the right accounts, and that gave us about 1,000 accounts. Next, politicians are more likely to follow other politicians online. So we collect the subset of tweets tweet accounts that are followed by at least one of the politicians identified in step 1. And then we use the supervised model to identify additional accounts for politicians. So the description of the model is in the paper, and I'm not going to go over the details here. So here we also filtered out accounts that are not super active, as well as accounts that have fewer than 1,000 followers. This gives us 700 additional accounts. Given these accounts, we collected 4.6 million tweets from January 2014 to October 2018. So that's a 4-year span. Next, we categorize tweets based on which topic they're focused on. So taking technology as an example, we start with a handful of keywords, like compute, kiosk, and then we use a word-to-vec cosine similarity approach to collect additional keywords that are similar in semantics. Next, we use this expanded list of keywords, and we filter for the subset of tweets that contain at least one of those keywords. So for our tweet data set, 3.4% of total tweets are technology related. Using this approach, we repeat the process for development tweets, poverty, corruption, and inflation. As you can see on the slides, greetings is the one that focuses on casual conversation, relationship building kind of conversations. And despite the simplicity of this approach, we see from a representative sample that we manually labeled, the precision and recall are both above 0.8. Now, coming back to our research questions, let's look at the overall presence of Indian politicians first. So BJP has a significantly more number of politicians, and they also tweeted more. In fact, 51% of all the tweets in our database from BJP politicians. I don't think it's a surprise. Like if we use the 2014 national election results, we see that the majority of the seats in Lok Sabha are actually owned by BJP. Now, who are the most influential accounts? So here the x-axis are the follower accounts in log scale, and the y-axis is a median favorite count for tweets from a single account. I don't think it's surprising to anyone sitting here that Narendra Modi has the highest number of followers as well as the highest average favorite count. But we also see that Rahul Gandhi, despite having a fraction of followers than Narendra Modi has, actually have the highest average number of retweets. So a possible explanation here is Modi's account tweets very frequently. In comparison, Gandhi is more strategic and crafted in terms of when and how he tweets. We also see that looking at other names, that other highly retweeted accounts are heads of other political parties. The next thing we did was that past research has shown that celebrities, for instance, tend to buy bot followers to increase their perceived social media influence. So here we use Botometer to estimate what the fraction of followers for the key leaders are bots. We see that 63% and 55% of a randomly sampled Modi and Gandhi followers are in fact bots. That is so much higher than another study which suggests that the fraction of bots on Twitter as a whole is 9 to 50%. So we definitely see some sort of inflated, overstated online presence for the ruling and opposition leaders. Now, moving on to the actual content of the tweets. So here, the x-axis are the tweet categories, and the y-axis is the fraction of tweets for that category by each party, and the parties are separated by color. So focusing on greetings, we see that BJP is significantly more interested in tweeting greeting-related casual conversation tweets compared to INC and the other parties. INC, on the other hand, are more focused on corruption here and inflation. The results here suggest the ruling party is posting goodwill, a relationship building tweets, while the opposition party is kind of focuses more on polarizing issues. Next, moving on to do we see party-based differences in communication style strategies? So in our paper, we looked into hashtag usage, language complexity, and sentiment appeals in these various tweets. Due to the time limitation here, we're only going to focus on hashtag usage. Many prior studies have shown that politicians use hashtags to frame or counter-frame issues. In the United States, for instance, they will use pro-choice or pro-life to specific build narratives on abortion. In this case, one of our interests is to examine what sort of hashtags, greeting hashtags, are used by different parties. So to examine the difference, we first collected the 50 most popular tweets, greeting-related tweets by BJP, and another 50 most popular greeting-related tweets from INC, and then we manually labeled them into 5 different categories. Party-centric, that is, we celebrate the party, we celebrate the members within the party, and nationalistic tweets, greetings, and sports-related greetings, Hinduism-related greetings, and if they're not part of from 4, then is labeled as neutral. I think the details of the regression model is in the paper. Here we'll go over the high-level results. So the x-axis are the hashtag categories, and the y-axis is INC politicians' likelihood of using hashtags from specific categories compared to the BJP. And you can see all the likelihood is negative. What this means is that INC party politicians are significantly less likely to tweet nationalistic greetings tweets, as well as celebrating parties and party members. This result here is consistent with prior studies that suggest BJP as a party is focused more on building, using nationalistic rhetoric for outreach, and they may also be using party-based hashtags to mention other party members and then elevate their presence on Twitter. So we did something similar with corruption-related hashtags. We assigned them into issue-based and personal attacks. The results here shows that BJP is significantly more likely to talk about corruption using generic terms, policy-centric terms, while INC is focused on attacking individual politicians. For instance, here it says Modi robs India. Now, moving on to rhetorics from the key party leaders, we actually see that the communication style actually is reflective of what the party does as a whole. If we look at the most retweeted greetings tweet for Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi, Modi is congratulating the cricket team for their performance in the World Cup, while Rahul Gandhi is sarcastically congratulating a director of a bank, but instead, he is actually accusing them of doing a terrible job with demonetization. So similarly here, Narendra Modi on corruption, Narendra Modi is stating that India is making steady fast process to eradicate corruption, while the Rahul Gandhi's most retweeted tweet on corruption is accusing the PM of being corrupt himself. So to summarize the result of our paper, this is one of the large-scale examination of technology and political outreach in the global south setting. We see that BJP dominates all the party in presence and activity level, and then politicians as a whole tweet more casual goodwill, relationship building tweets rather than policy relevant posts. Focusing on party differences, ruling party are more focused on greetings, simplistic tweets, and nationalistic celebrate a party-centric hashtags. And opposition INC focuses more on corruption, poverty-related polarizing issues, and more antagonistic. And they're rewarded for being antagonistic against the governing party. So why is this related to ICTD? Well, so democracy or the political communication that is representative is really important to the health of democracy. Traditionally, news media plays a role of gatekeeper to check or for state to ensure that the policies of the government are explained on, or the results, impact of these policies are explained. But given the social media platforms like Twitter, political leaders, like in the United States, like Donald Trump, they can bypass media's gatekeeping abilities and reach their constituents directly and misrepresent the impacts of their policies or even themselves, their own accomplishment. And then here we also see that politicians in India can choose to focus on polarizing topics, or they can simply focusing on outreach if they choose to. Our paper is limited in the following ways. So we don't really distinguish national and state level officials, and we know that state differences is pretty prominent in India. We also only focus on Twitter, and we do not address the issue of success. So is BJP more successful because they're much better at elevating each other's social media presence, or because they emphasize nationalistic identity? Does that contribute to their success? We don't really measure that here. And future work should also examine the difference between election and non-election period. This is my end of our presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions if there is any. Thank you.
Thanks, Lia. We have any question? I don't see any question typed in the chat box, and I don't yet see any hand up. So I had this question. So in India, as we know, like most people probably do not use Twitter. So how do you see this your findings? Talk about the overall political strategies by the Indian politicians.
I think it's a relevant. I think this is a valid criticism. I think the reason why we use Twitter instead of the other social media platforms, because Facebook doesn't really make their data available, and this is partly due to the limitations of data access. And in the paper itself, we do acknowledge that the population in Twitter might be biased in terms of the socioeconomic people with certain socioeconomic status may be more present on Twitter than others from different background. But regardless of these limitations, we believe that this is like a valuable first step to examine the different strategies on different social media platforms by politicians from both West and global South settings.
Can I add something to that, which is that There are very important second order effects of Twitter, which is that something makes it on Twitter and then it reaches mainstream news, television or print or something. And there's research which has shown actually that what politicians tweet about in India makes it to the mainstream news. What is important is not so much that only 30, 40, 50 million Indians of the 1.345 billion people have direct access to Twitter. What matters is that every journalist in India knows that the only way they can hear from a politician now is by listening to what they're saying on Twitter, because politicians no longer give direct interviews to the press. So if you want to hear what Narendra Modi has to say, you have no option but to watch what he says on Twitter, because it is now the primary source of output, not just for the top shelf leaders, but even for mid-level and low-level politicians. There isn't an equivalent of, Donald Trump, who stands in front of the White House press briefing and takes maybe even aggressive questions from the press. In India, what the politician wants to say, they say on Twitter, and there is no question of a journalist having the gumption to ask an aggressive question, even for a low-level politician, let aside a top-level politician. So essentially, the interplay between politicians on Twitter is the main way in which we can understand politicians' discourse.
Joyojeet, can I ask a follow-up, or Lia, actually, I should probably go back to you. In the States, we have like national polling organizations like Pew that do nationally representative surveys and are able to give us some insight into the user base of social media like Twitter. Is there nothing like that in India at all?
I think Georgia should take the question.
Yeah. So there is one organization called CSDS, and that has actually shown that indeed Twitter is less used than others in terms of direct citizen use. WhatsApp is the big one, but the key thing is that the same teams for politicians which run their Twitter accounts run their WhatsApp outreach. So really the same material is making it from one format to another. So that's what the Pew equivalent showed for India. So.
Yeah, like they're able to tease out demographics, age, region of use, because even if there aren't that many Twitter users in India, it would be interesting to know what the demographics of the user base is.
So the most interesting piece of research on this was around there's a state in India called Uttar Pradesh, traditionally one of the poorest and most backward, economically backward states in India. And during its election, it was largely called the WhatsApp election, because all political parties basically decided that this election is going to get fought on social media, and it was a state election. So what we are saying is that these are national leaders, so they have a much higher stake in actually presenting themselves on Twitter. But even down to states, this has already permeated. So I think social media in elections is absolutely here to stay in India. So.
Okay, we have a question from Indrani. Indrani, you can go.
Thank you, Lia, for a great talk. So my question was like, I'm just anecdotally, when I look at WhatsApp forwards, or, like watch broadcast media, watch Republic TV, there's the news around, let's say, somebody like Rahul Gandhi seems much more antagonistic, right? I mean, the media in WhatsApp, in broadcast channels, it feels much more antagonistic towards the opposition. So, like, what would you say about that? Because here in your summary, you're saying that the Indian National Congress is more antagonistic towards the governing party. But when I watch the news, let's say something like Times Now, Republic TV, or like WhatsApp groups, it's much more antagonistic towards the opposition.
So I kind of want to briefly commenting that we know that I don't know how to comment on India situation, but in the United States, this sort of language or personal like based individual centric attacks are sort of kind of contributing to increased polarization, between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the United States context. So I think maybe Georgie can comment more on how this may contribute to increased polarization or kind of animosity between people.
Sure, actually, Indrani, that's a great question. And there are 2 points I'll make about this. One is that there was recently a very widely viral news article about Rahul Gandhi and how people should learn about mental health from Rahul Gandhi, because he's the most bullied, highly bullied and aggressively attacked politician in India. And it's true that the way that the parties have gone against Rahul Gandhi and against the opposition in general is not by calling them crooks, but by calling them fools, right? By repeatedly infantilizing them, because Indians will vote for a thug, they'll vote for a crook, but they'll never vote for somebody who's a stupid person. Yeah, so then the common word that's been used for him is that he's a fool. And importantly, 2 things matter here. Is one is that the government of India is now, by a significant order of magnitude, the largest advertiser in India. Okay, so if you go against the government, you're not going to get any advertisements on your news channel, on your newspaper. So which news decide to go against the government is a real conundrum for them. And Narendra Modi specifically doesn't do the dirty work. And this is a really important point, because Narendra Modi has not said negative things ever on social media since 2013. He's kind of consistently been the nice guy, and then the second layer of politicians underneath him do the aggressive work.
Amit Shah, right?
Yeah. So
right.
Good.
Thank you, Lia, Joyojeet, and everyone in the audience. We are over the time, and so this was our session. Thank you all for attending. And
can I just quick hop in here and make a comment, not about the presentations, thank you all, about session times. We have with the Zoom IDs previously presented the times that the Zoom sessions start to facilitate people arriving early and being led into the waiting room. However, I just wanted to clarify that the Zoom times are typically earlier than the official starting time. Just in case some of you were confused as to why you're showing up early and then waiting around, that's why. So we have updated the Zoom ID table on the website to reflect the session starting, the official start time, but I hope everybody continues to arrive early to facilitate the waiting room process. Thank you. See you all at the coffee break for session 4.